In the last few lectures, we had a chance to set up Visual Studio Code to work with a bunch of compilers, namely the compiler from Microsoft, the GCC compiler, and the Clang compiler. In this lecture, we will set up a single project which is going to have the ability to seamlessly switch between these compilers. So if you have a project, you may want to build it with the GCC compiler. We want that to be as easy as choosing an option to build with another compiler, and your project is going to be using that compiler. That's honestly one of the reasons why I chose Visual Studio Code as the editor of choice for the course, because it is crucially important to be able to work with different compilers in your C++ project. And that's really even more important if you want your project to be cross-platform. For example, you want your C++ project to work on Windows, Mac, and Linux, even on Android and other things, but this course is going to be mainly focusing on desktop platforms. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, I have a Visual Studio Code open up in a project I did earlier, but remember, we want our current project here to also be able to use the compiler from Microsoft. And we know that to be able to use that compiler, we need to start from a terminal that knows about the environment variables for the compiler from Microsoft. So let's close this up here. And I am going to go to my start menu and say developer. I am going to say developer PowerShell for the compiler from Microsoft. So Visual Studio 2022 here. I am going to choose this. This is going to open the window here. And from here, I am going to start Visual Studio Code. So I am going to say code and type this dot and hit enter. This is going to open Visual Studio Code in a mode where it knows about all the compilers that we might want to build our current project with. So let's make sure we have a terminal window here. Let's make this pop up. Okay, we can clear this. And we first need to make sure we have the compiler from Microsoft. That's cl.exe, we can call it. So let's wait and see. You see, we can call it here. We have a message here. If you don't have it available, you're going to have a red error saying the compiler is not recognizable or something like that. We can test to see if we have access to the GCC compiler or the G++ compiler. If we do G++ -- version, we see a message here. Let's use Clang ++ version, and we should have it available here. And now we have a Visual Studio Code in a mode where it can use all these compilers. I am going to go at a location on my project here, and I will have an empty folder containing nothing. So let's delete the main file here. We don't need it. We're going to create our own. So it is an empty folder. Make sure you have an empty folder on your system to do this. So we're going to drag and drop this on top of Visual Studio Code, and our Visual Studio Code instance knows about the path to the compilers that we want to use. Again, this is really important. Many students forget this and they have problems. You should be able to call the compiler from Microsoft like we do here. You see, we have a message. You should be able to call the G++ compiler, G++ version. You should be able to do that and see a message pop up. You should be able to call the Clang ++ compiler to be able to do what we are doing here. So if you see messages like this, you are ready to do what we are about to do. We are going to create a main CPP file that we are going to build. That's going to be main.cpp. And we will steal the code. Now you know where we get the code we use to do things. So let's copy this and bring that in our Visual Studio Code instance. Now we have the code, but we want the code to be able to build with all the compilers that we have on our system here. So let's just set up one compiler. We're going to set up GCC first because it is my favorite compiler. Let's come to terminal and say configure tasks. And we will set up the G++ compiler. We're going to choose G++ like we have done earlier. This is going to create a tasks.json file. And we need to make sure the compiler is building in C++20 mode. We don't want to type this. So let's go back to our GitHub repository where we are used to stealing things from. We are going to go to the GCC section and steal the code for the args section here. Let's copy it to avoid any typos. We can come back to our section here and remove this thing and use the code we got from the GitHub repository. Okay, so the other thing we want to do is to name this to say build with GCC. And this is going to allow us to build with the GCC compiler. Let's make sure we can do that. Actually, we can go to the main CPP file, make sure it is selected, and we can run a task and choose to build with GCC. If we do that, we should get a build finished successfully message, at least I hope. Okay, we have the build successful message. And another thing we want to do is to use IntelliSense in C++20 mode. You already know how to do that. We come to View Command Palette. We say Edit Configurations UI, and we go all the way to the bottom. Let's scroll all the way to the bottom and use the C++ standard, which is C++20. Once we do that, we're going to close this. And we have a project that uses GCC as the compiler. But we want to be able to use the Clang compiler and the MSVC compiler. Now, to do that, all you really have to do is come to your tasks.json and add configurations to the tasks.json array here. And all we have to do is come to the end and add a comma. Okay, and we are going to steal the configuration we did for the MSVC compiler. To do that, we go where we stored our project, and we go to the MSVC configuration, and we go in the .vscode folder, and we're going to open our tasks.json file. And in our tasks, we are going to steal this section here. You see it is selected in red. Make sure you select this entire thing. We are going to come back in Visual Studio Code, and we are going to add another entry that says build with the compiler from Microsoft. Let's go down and add Clang. We're going to add a comma, go all the way to the bottom. And we are going to choose the project we did with the Clang compiler. Let's go up again. And we are going to go in that project. In there, we go in the VS Code folder, the .vs Code folder, I should say. We are going to open this with an editor. I am using Notepad++ on Windows here. And you see we have our Clang configuration. We are going to select it. You see the red thing that is selected here, select it all. And we are going to copy it. And we are going to paste it in our tasks.json file within Visual Studio Code within the current project, which is a template project here. So let's paste this in. Now we have 3 compilers we could use to build this project here, and we will have the ability to choose from them. For example, we can use GCC, we can use the compiler from Microsoft, or we can use the Clang compiler. Let's save this and close the tasks.json file, and we can even close the .vscode folder. And now we have the project. We can open a terminal window to play with this a little bit. Okay, so let's go down here. We can clear and remove the rooster file using the rm command here. It is going to go away. You see it has disappeared from here. Now let's build with the compiler from Microsoft. All we have to do is say run tasks. And now that we have all these compilers configured, you see we have the option to choose the compiler we want to build with. We can use the GCC compiler, we can use the Clang compiler, we can use the MSVC compiler. In this case, we are going to choose the MSVC compiler just because we can. So let's choose that. And we will wait for it to build our project. And when it's done, it's going to generate a rooster.exe file that we can run. Now the build is good, we can clear and run rooster. If we run it, it's going to say value 3, exactly what is expected from this program here. We can even build with the Clang compiler. So let's use the Clang compiler. We're going to choose build with Clang. We will wait for it to build. The build is good. We can hit enter, clear, and run rooster. And it is going to say value 3. And we now have the option to build with either of the compilers we have installed and configured on our Windows system here. And this is really cool. Now, what we are going to do is reuse this project as a template throughout this course here. So I might as well close this from Visual Studio Code and go in my folder where it is and call it our template project. Okay, so we can call this C++20 template project. And because we don't want to redo the configurations we have done in this chapter here, whenever we need to create a project, we will copy this folder and use it as a starting point, and it is going to have immediate access to the compilers that we have set up in this section. And that's going to be really cool. This is really all I had to share in this lecture. I hope you found it interesting. We are going to stop here in this one, and I will see you next time.